Okay, functional programming in JavaScript. So this is going to be a little bit different. Um, I think what I'm going to do is just do what I do best, which is having projects put in front of me that I have to either enhance or fix. And there's not a lot of content on YouTube around this particular topic, right? A lot of content is more focused on greenfield, functional programming topics. Build something in 30 minutes or whatever, right? And that's really not where you live as an engineer most of your time, or a developer. So I'm just going to focus on trying to find projects, open source projects, JavaScript projects, and I'm going to try to find issues with them. I'm going to look at the GitHub issues, see what I can find. I might just dive directly into the code base and see if there's opportunities for introducing functional programming concepts. And that's just, in a nutshell, basically what I'm going to do. So, just going to get started here. And bring up, so before I search for GitHub, this is my GitHub. There's not a whole lot here just because I spend most of my time working, not building up my GitHub repo, which I should, but you know, it's one of those things that after you've been doing this for as long as I have, it's, you know, it's something you want to do, you make an effort to do it, and then you get pulled away to work on something else. So yeah, this is just kind of the state of it. The industry would consider me a senior software engineer. I've been working in functional programming for a while. And so this is me. I'm out here in Hawaii. And I've been working remotely out here. I've been in Hawaii for about almost 10 years now and working remotely. And let's try refreshing this. And in that time, I've definitely been doing functional programming stuff. I've been doing Erlang stuff. I've been doing F# stuff. And I've been doing Node.js, some TypeScript stuff. Mainly just back-end server stuff. I don't know what's going on with LinkedIn right now, but something's always going on with LinkedIn. Okay. So yeah, so let's take a look here. Okay, so yeah, so for the past 6 months I've been doing F# stuff, solely focused on F#, doing a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot of F# stuff. I've been doing this position is an F# position, but unfortunately it's very little F# and a lot of SQL, a lot of AWS, a lot of DevOps. So not a whole lot of F#, but they're definitely using F# there. I'm no longer there just because it's a long story, but just a lot more database and DevOps stuff than actual F# work. Prior to that, I did some Node.js stuff, And then here I did some Node.js stuff. So you can kind of take a look and see. I'm not going to promote myself too much, but I've been basically doing this for a long time, and uh, since even before this. But even here I was doing some some F sharp stuff, early days F sharp stuff. This is when I first got into it actually. But I was doing .NET long before even this. I was doing I think I started in 2003, so with C sharp. But um, so yeah, over the years I've done a lot of uh, functional programming work in different functional programming languages, like I mentioned earlier. Erlang, Elixir, F sharp, OCaml, um, and I've done a little bit of Haskell stuff, but ultimately JavaScript is kind of the language that I always tend to come back to. I usually kind of find projects that are interesting, and so, but they're in like another language, or so I'll go and work on that project just to kind of take a break from JavaScript, and that's what I did recently, taking an F sharp role, and it was fine, but it just wasn't a good fit overall. It was just too much DevOps stuff and not enough actual development. So, so I'm just kind of finding my way back to JavaScript, honestly, and so that's what we're gonna do. So, yeah, enough rambling. Let's search for um, JavaScript public and repos that have not been archived on GitHub. Let's see. So obviously there's a lot of different projects that we can dive into, but I'm just going to try to give you, like I said before, the industry considers me a senior software engineer. Like I said, I've been doing this for a while and working for a lot of different companies, working in a lot of different languages, and mainly back-end stuff, cloud stuff, right? So I'm senior. So the idea, I'm senior. So the idea is that I just want to give you kind of that methodical approach that I take when I'm writing functional programming code in JavaScript. Now, this video may be a little bit all over the place just because I have not, like I said, I've been doing F sharp stuff for the last 6 months. I haven't really looked at JavaScript. I haven't done any Node stuff, so it's I'm going to be rusty getting back into this, but hopefully it won't be too bumpy along the way. So I'm sure that it'll all come back to me as I get more into it. So we're just going to look. I'm just going to just kind of scan here and just kind of look at some things. There's quite a few jQuery stuff here. I don't want to do anything too old. This is 2016, 2015. Back in those days, yes, functional programming was around. Yes, people were actually doing it. But, there was still quite a bit of, JavaScript developers were still trying to figure out if they were going to keep using require statement or using the import statement. There was just different things going on, and so I don't want to go too far back, just because it's not a fair. It's not really fair to go too far back. I mean, I could, but I'd like to kind of keep it recent. So 2022 that's okay. It's still a little further back than I'd like to go. 2023, 2025. So we're getting into some more recent things. And I'd like to just sort of start off with, since I'm just kind of getting back into JavaScript after not having to think about it for 6 months, even longer than that, probably closer to 8 months to be, if I'm honest. But I don't want to just jump into something that is going to be, that's going to require a lot of upfront knowledge and research. Like, you know, in order to kind of refresh my memory, like this, for instance, this has Node, React, Redux, and D3 in it. That's a lot of different things in there. And it's not to say that I couldn't tackle that, but it's just a lot of different things. I'd like to kind of keep it, to just like Node or just D3 or something like that, right? At least for the beginning, just to kind of get my feet wet and refresh my memory, like I said before. So I'll just keep looking here. Streaming interfaces, Axios, standard errors, request response transforms. We'll take a look at this. Looks like it's just API stuff. Let's take a look at the issues. Let's just jump right into the issues of this. Let's see. Automated React. Okay, 2 issues. So there's some chatter on these. Axios instance doesn't inherit default headers from API sauce. Is there a way to redo a request if failed? Okay. I'm wondering if there's a way to insert the config of older requests in a new one. Response. Make new request here with same config as old one. Well, the old one could be, I don't know, you could memoize the original, and then if the one that you just, if the initial one fails, you want to fall back, you could memoize the quote-unquote old one, but and it's just a simple if statement here. See, the thing about, as a functional programmer, as functional programmers, we want to reduce the amount of structured statements like this, and we want to stick more to expressions or just function calls. So like an if is a function call, right? And we could make it a function call instead of, a conditional here that has, 1, 2, 3 conditionals here, and then like run some code, right? So that's kind of like what I'm looking at there in terms of if I'm gonna make this functional, I would want this to be a function, and then I'd probably want to like clean that up and make that like, because basically all of these conditions need to be true in order for this to run, and then you would want to say like, well, make a new request with the old one or the original one. So I don't know, it's kind of interesting, but we'll keep looking. It's canceled. It's not a function. So there's an error being thrown here. So making a post, and it showed the below error. So it's all in the API sauce. Versions using our Axios. Can you provide a code sandbox? I wasn't able to replicate. Okay, so see, there's already kind of someone kind of looking into this, so I don't want to step on anyone else's toes. That's why I try to kind of look for things that don't really have much chatter or any chatter at all. Null request body sent as null string. We observed this after upgrading API sauce. Okay, so that's just a... Yeah, so I don't know how much of this is actually related to this code base versus... I don't even know what API sauce is, so let's just see. Alright, ring, 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 hello, hi, can I speak to JSON API? Speaking. Talking to APIs doesn't have to be awkward anymore. Oh, this is kind of like message passing. Low fat wrapper for the amazing Axios HTTP client library. All responses follow the same flow. Success and failure alike. Responses have a problem property to help guide exception flow. Okay. Define the API. Okay, so they're likely... API sauce is just wrapping Axios. And there's probably some interception it's just a wrapper, right? So they're doing certain things and then deferring probably to Axios for the actual functionality. So just building on top of Axios. Create an API call, just making things a little bit easier. Just headers. Okay, so it's just a wrapper, not the most interesting. Let's take a quick look at some of the code and see. So this is 11 months old. It's TypeScript. So again, I mean, there's nothing wrong with this code. Like, it works, it's totally fine, right? It's just that, again, you've got an if statement here, you got another if statement here. They're just statements. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that, and this is a short enough function, so, you know, if the value is a date, convert it to a number. If the value is a number, or the value is null, or the value is undefined, return the value. Okay, let's keep going. So that's just two-number helper function. Is within, okay, let's, wow, so is within one line. That's totally fine. Like, this is the kind of thing that I would like to see, because it's just inputs, right? And you're returning a Boolean, and then you're just kind of two conditionals here. I mean, that's what I like to see. Got some arrow functions here for is a promise. So we're trying to detect if this is a promise or not. Also good. And then default configuration for Axios default headers will also be merged in. Okay. So you have this default config, which just has a timeout, and then at some point we got these other constant messages here. What's the problem for the Axios response? Get problem from error. If return network error. If this, so I mean, fine. And then get problem from status. A lot of ifs. A lot of ifs. And you're using, so like I'm noticing like is like it's checking to see if this includes this error code, right? So we're using Node.js connection error codes, timeout error codes, which are these, right? So these are just arrays. And you're basically checking to see if the array includes the error code. Okay? If it does, then you want to return the problem. That's okay. But you have to kind of know that these errors, these constants here, you have to know that they're arrays. So you have to kind of come up here and say, oh, they're arrays, and then you're checking to see if if the code that's off the error that's being passed in to this function, if the code for that actually exists in one of these arrays. And I think there's probably a more cleaner way to say that than just like if statements. Like you could create a function in and of itself that takes in the status error codes and the error code itself, and generalize this conditional here to a function in and of itself that takes in your error codes, and it takes in the actual error code itself, and then determines whether or not the conditional is true, right? And then that way that particular generalized function can actually be used in all of these different places, right? And you're not constantly just doing dot here. So that's kind of one thing I see. It's small and it's subtle, but it's an opportunity to try to make the code easier to read without needing to like parse it line by line like that, right? Like, I mean, like you could say like this is like has status error codes, has timeout error codes, has Node.js connection error codes, or just connection error codes, right? Because unless there's another connection, there may be another connection error down here, but yeah, so that's just kind of what I'm seeing there. Again, it's small, but it's an opportunity to kind of make it a little bit more readable. Create an instance of our API using the configuration. Okay, so here, like, we're just creating a null, essentially a null instance, and then we're checking some condition. If the condition is true, then we're saying, okay, the instance is equal to this, otherwise the instance is equal to that. So this is like a very common mutable approach, but it doesn't have to be that, right? Because I'm now wondering, okay, if instance is here and it's being used here, so it's being used here, it's being assigned here and here, line 117 and 122. And then here you've got a, you're creating an empty array and you're just kind of like pushing things into it. You have a function that's literally pushing things into it. So you're trying to do the right thing, but I would argue that this is not really the right thing. This is more, again, this is more of a mutable approach. What you would want is you'd want to pass in the monitors, have it be added into the monitor inside the body of this function, and then return the monitors back out. We'll have to see how this is used later, but I like the use of the arrow functions here. But again, we're pushing into these, and so like the question is why. I'm assuming that these are all being declared on the outside of these functions because they're going to be used elsewhere down here, but just like this is declared on the outside because it's used on the inside, and we're going to want to use it in this large create function. We're going to want to use it further down somewhere. Excuse me, convenience for setting new request headers. Okay, so for each of the headers, you're setting them. Again, I wouldn't do it this way. I mean, for each is okay. It's a higher order function. That's fine. But you should be reducing these headers. Like I would just use a reduce here. You want to get into the habit as a functional programmer of using the same higher order functions for pretty much everything. Like a lot of developers, when they start off, will use map and filter for pretty much everything, right? They'll use map a lot, and that's fine, but I there's nothing wrong with that. You can use map, you can use filter. It's just that when you're doing this kind of thing, and then you're returning the instance, like that's why the instance is on the outside. That's why it's like on the outside here. It's because you're doing assignment. Oops. You're doing assignment in here, right? You're setting headers and stuff, and that's fine. But like, yeah, there's no real flow. That's kind of the problem here. Is you're setting the headers, you're returning the instance. You're basically mutating, and then you're setting the instance, or returning the instance rather. And so in order to kind of understand, like, you have to kind of go back up here and kind of see where things are defined, how they're getting mutated or changed, and right, delete. You want that same that same instance to be used kind of everywhere, almost like a singleton, right? And that's kind of why these functions are written this way. Again, it works. It's just like how can we achieve the same thing but in a more functional, using a more functional approach. That's sort of the idea here. So, yeah. I do like this. I don't like this. I think instance should be passed in, and then you should just grab it. Or, yeah, you just pass in the instance, and then you pattern match on the instance and grab it. So, like, the fact that instance is an object and then you're dotting on defaults and then base URL, I would pattern match on defaults and base URL right in here in the argument or parameter. If there's an instance, yeah, I would just pass it in and then return the base URL from there instead of just not passing it anything, right? You're just calling get base URL. You're not passing in anything, and you're just returning the base URL. Again, it's fine, it works, but it's not very functional. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. Is like, how can we make things more functional? And I understand that authors of this weren't looking at it from a functional perspective, but we are. That's what we're trying to do. I like the use of the dot or the spread operator. It's been a while. Still got F# on the brain, but yeah, I do like that, the use of the spread operator there. Again, with the for each. Yeah, I mean, it's overwrite our Axios request with whatever our object looks like now. Axios request config, do request transforms. So yeah, you're just overwriting. You're mutating basically, right? By calling this transform function. I don't like that. Honestly, I don't like for each unless you're specifically the point is to have a side effect. That's why you use for each. But if you're, and it depends on the side effect. Like, typically it's like if you want to spin up an object, or you want to show something on the screen, or you want to and you need to kind of move through a couple, things like that, move through a collection of things to spin up, and then it's okay. It kind of makes sense in that sense, but like this, I wouldn't do this. I would, instead of using for each, I would probably reduce over the request transforms, because that's ultimately what you're trying to change. And so I would just have a reduce function that passes in the request transforms, overwrites them, and returns the new request transforms to the caller. Right. Add the async request transforms. And I would never do this. So this is a loop. And in functional programming, we don't like loops. I'm just gonna put it out there and be honest. Like, loops are fine for very specific things. But like this, you're looping over, and if it's a promise, if the transform is a promise, then you're going to just await that. Else, you're going to await something else. So for each one of these, you're going to await, right? And you're awaiting based on if it's a promise or not. So why not just use promise.all on these? Like, so that's my first question, is like, well, how many of these request transforms are we actually thinking is actually going to be here? Like, what's the max length of like request transforms that we can reasonably expect? Are we talking 1 million request transforms? I don't think so. Like, that to me, that seems kind of silly. So I think this is gonna likely be a small amount of async request transforms. I could be wrong, but let's say that it's small, right? Why not just do an async await on this, on all of these, and then have a function that you pass in that kind of says, okay, for each one that I'm awaiting, check to see if, go and actually grab the config for that particular transform, right? And check to see if it's a promise. If it is, await it, right? If it's not, then call this transform function, right? And so I would rework all of this, and this is in an if statement. So I would rework all this so that it's utilizing more of a collection of things, a collection of request transforms that for each one has a function, has the same function that's being applied, which in this case would be check grabbing the request config, which we would probably just pass in as, you know, a parameter for the one function that's being applied to every single one of these request transforms. And then depending on if that request transform is a promise or not, run the right additional function. So that's what I would be doing. I'd have one function that would take in the request config, the isPromise function, the transform function, and for whichever one that is, whichever request transform that is, they would all be kind of in a collection, and they'd all have a function that's just being applied to them. And as I'm thinking about that, this is being done in a serial-like fashion, right? From 0 to whatever. And with each await, like, you're pausing. So you're getting to one, you're pausing to await it, and you're going to the next one. Well, I guess it's asynchronous, right? So awaiting is just like it's gonna go off, it's gonna move to the next one, that's gonna go off, and whenever they're ready, they're gonna come back, right? But yeah, and so you're having a side effect here. You're not really awaiting anything to come back to be assigned. You're just kind of saying, go do that thing, and then move on to the next one. And if there's no connection between one running and then another one running, then you can pretty much run them kind of simultaneously. Unless there's a problem with that, running them simultaneously, like if that's gonna like actually break something, if you need to kind of run them so that they interleave instead of a blast all at the same time, that's something to consider. But yeah, it's just kind of what I see there. After the call, convert the Axios response, then execute our monitors. Okay, so we're converting the date to a number. Again, I would use this is fine. What is chain? Await convert response, run monitors, return this instance, okay? Convert. So after the call, convert the Axios response, then execute our monitors. After the call, convert the Axios response, and then convert the Axios response, and then run the monitors. So this is fine too. I would probably change this so that it's more compositional, so that you're doing a convert response and then running monitors. Like this is fine. Again, it's just normal code. But from a functional perspective, you want to compose convert response with run monitors, so that they're just kind of like, and you might want to give it another name, like whatever, like something that makes more sense rather than following execution steps, right? Which is a normal thing. Like it's a very common thing to just name things like, oh, I'm converting this and then I'm running this. But like what is, as a functional programmer, we like to think about what does that actually mean to convert something and then run something. What does it mean? Can we label it something that has more meaning than just convert and then run? All right, so that's another thing that I would be looking at is how do I compose these and how do I give them a more meaningful name that actually makes more sense than just having to understand something by looking at one line and then moving to the next line and then moving to the next line and so on and so forth, right? To understand what's actually going on. If you have like a grammar that's more expressive, then, down here you could express that in a way that actually makes sense to the reader. Because right now, as readers, we have to look at line by line and we have to make sense of what's actually happening when that could just be expressed, right? So it's good, but that's what I would look at doing is how do I add some composition here and give it some more meaningful names. So these are all good. This is all fine. We're casting. I might make a function that actually does something like this, but it's fine. Ternary, totally fine. Love that. This is fine too. I don't like nulls. In functional programming, we don't like nulls, so I would figure out how to represent status another way other than null. Original error the same way. It should be something other than null. Like I would be wrapping this as an option type, and that's just a functional programming idiom. So option or maybe these are ways of capturing a value that doesn't exist, capturing like a null value without actually using null. So I would be looking to swap that and to not use null. I'd probably just create my own. I would use a library. And I would use an option type here so that status is either going to be type string or it's going to be type none, right? Same thing for original error, same thing for config, and same thing for headers and data, right? Okay. Give an opportunity for anything to the response transforms to change stuff along the way. Interesting. Okay. Change things. If response transforms length is greater than 0, transform the transform response. And this looks like the same code to me. What do you guys think? This looks like the exact same code. Add the async response transform. So in convert response, we have add the async response transforms. Okay. And in up here in do request, we have async, add the async request transforms. So this looks like the same code to me. So now there's even more of a reason to extract this code out and make it a function that can just be called add the async request transforms. You should be able to just call that function, call a function, passing in the request transforms, and have it just do this work. Because there's no reason for this to be here. And in this function as well, right? It's the exact same code. And in functional programming, we try to build a low tolerance for this kind of stuff, right? It's very normal, and there's nothing wrong with it because it's obviously working, right? You find something that works in one spot of the code, you know it's going to work in this other spot in the code, and that's pretty much it. And as engineers, um, your job is to just try to get it to work um, under tight deadlines a lot of the times, and you also are trying to uh, make it as make the code as robust as possible, right? And that's where you have your unit tests and all these other things. But in functional programming, this is this is one of those things where you when you see it, you should it should make you a little bit uncomfortable, right? You should see it and recognize it and want to fix it right away. It's the even if it's going to take you a little bit of time, because now if you just make this a function, it's just a simple function call, and this logic, right, is written once. And this is a very, as I said, it's a very normal thing that you see in code bases. So that's definitely something I would look at doing, like immediately. Like it's bothering me right now. I almost want to do it right now, but I'm just gonna let it go and keep looking here. So then we finally get to the base object, which is the source object, and that's got all this stuff in here. That's fine. All right. So that took some time, and that's the top level API sauce TypeScript thing. So overall, not bad. There's some good stuff in here. There's only a few things I would change. I would definitely try to, well, I won't, let me back up. Overall, it's not bad. There's definitely some good things in here. Spread operator's great. I love the use of that. I love the use of arrow functions. I do not like the use of mutability that's in here. So declaring these arrays out here and then mutating them on the inside of functions. Like I would just change that right away. I would figure out a more functional way of working with the actual instance, right? And I would try to replace these for each calls with reduce, higher order reduce calls. That just makes more sense to me. And yeah, I would refactor this do request function here and the convert response function here. So the do request and the convert response, I'd look at refactoring those so that we have one function to do the transforms. Right, to add the async response transforms and then await them. Yeah, I would redo this. And I would make these config and headers, some of these constants, I would make them option types. So that we don't need to actually initialize things with a null value. Yeah, so those are some things I would do straight away for API sauce, at least at the top level. Again, I don't know this, but so this instance, see right here, we have instance doesn't inherit default headers from API sauce. So the instance to be the same as instance.headers. So something's going on with that instance, right? And maybe there's something there. Who knows? But But yeah, like that's what I would do there. So that's API sauce. Let's come back. Oh, too many requests. All right. So we're back at the repos. How are we doing on time? Let me just get rid of this. Okay. Not too bad. Let's see if there's anything else that jumps out. Another wrapper. We just looked at a wrapper. Let's try to find something different. Database migration. Query builder for React. 2024 TaffyDB, an open source JavaScript database for your browser. Let's take a look. Issues, 91 issues. I'm not really a big database person, but create an undo, query with both and plus or filters does not work. Oh. Let's see what they mean. See what they're talking about. Yeah, this is an old issue. We're trying to make a combination of and or filters work, as in the example provided in the writing queries pages. It does not work for me. I don't believe this is valid JSON. When you attempt to parse this, the second element is dropped. Note that this works. Okay. Interesting. What else? Order, start, limit, need help. Need helps are good. I'm not succeeding in paging through records using start, like 30 return at a time. Then 31 through 60, then 61 through 90. If I do order, start, limit, it's not returning things in desired order. Does anyone have an example of paging through records that I could look at? Very old issues. These are some very old issues. We don't even know if they're still around, but setting the cache size does not change the cache size. Okay. What unit is in cache size? Taffy, cache size. Okay. 10,000. And we're using a loop here to insert things into the database. Okay. Where data.length equals 10,000. Failed to execute set item on storage. Setting the value on Taffy database exceeded the quota. What is wrong in this part of the code? It doesn't work either if I type this database.store name before settings were named database. Interesting. Okay, let's take a look at some of the code. Looks like there's some tests here. It is JavaScript. Oh, my goodness, 10 years. We can tell because we're still using the var keyword. So This might be too old for us to look at. Let's come back. See the most recent. 3 years ago. Writing queries. So updated the docs 3 years ago and updated the README. There's 13 contributors, all JavaScript. Just pass in a JSON array. Interesting. Let's take a look at, so if we just come back to this test here that was written 10 years ago, or last touched 10 years ago. I'm sure there's a lot of things we could find about it, but just because it was written 10 years ago. But 10 years ago, again, we're still, 10 years ago was 2016, so it's still a time where functional programming, people are writing functional programs, they're just not, yeah, maybe not as much as they are today, but so, yeah. Whew. Yeah. So nested loops. That's probably a sorting, looks like a sorting algorithm they're trying to run here. It's fine. Let's take a look. Let's come back to out of the test. Whoops, docs. Taffy. So 11 years ago. Yeah, I think this is just too old, unfortunately. Yeah, it's just too old. It's not really fair to look at this from a functional perspective, unfortunately. So we'll keep looking. Pusher JavaScript library. What is this? 2025, so 6/11. Been around for a while. What is Pusher? Pusher Channels JavaScript client. The Pusher Channels client library supports web browsers, web workers, and Node.js. If you're looking for the Pusher Channels server library for Node. Okay, so this is, it's like a WebSocket or server sent events or something. I don't know. Yeah, it's like just channels for sockets. Yeah, it's like a server push library. Okay, let's keep going. We're not too interested in that. Front-end charting application that facilitates easy creation of simple, beautiful charts. A chart builder. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, nope, 2017. My bad. That's pretty old. 2025, minimal interactive command line prompts library. Okay. Let's look at some of the issues. Interactive symbol bug when mixed with colors. Interactive checklist prompt. Feature request. Add support for TypeScript. Separator for interactive. Should switch and prompt warn user if type doesn't exist. I was developing a tool with, and if, this is a while ago. Use a non-existing type, expected behavior, warning error about non-existing type. Thanks for your work on this project. Okay. Okay, only 9 issues. Not too bad. Let's look at some code from 7 years ago. 8 years ago? 7, 8 years ago. Okay. Interactive 7 input. I have no idea where to start. I'm just going to start at prompt. Okay, so we got a class called prompt with a constructor. It's taking in some options. Again, we just have on the outside, we've got an array and we're pushing some items into that array. And then we're returning a string, right? So this is something we could easily rewrite to be more functional. We could rewrite this entirely so that it's not a class, but that it's just a function that takes in those options. And composes that with like, so we'll have to see how prompt is used, but yeah, already I'm just kind of seeing that that's, you could rewrite that. Or you could make that functional for sure. Oh, let's see, let's look at menu. Yeah, this is a very OO or object-oriented which makes sense. It's a charting, but I've made functional charts. I've made functional charting systems myself, so just because it's a chart doesn't mean it has to be object-oriented. Right? It's just a default, and that most people tend to gravitate to, because that's what you learn when you first learn programming. But once you get into functional, you start to see that there's a lot you can do. So interesting. WYSIWYG. I think we've been going for a little while now. I'm not gonna go too much longer, but let's see, anything else? Okay, extractor, 2025. 2 years, 4 years, not too bad. Let's look at some issues. Specific site work with Dino, but not code. Okay. Alright, a few issues. They all have some chatter on them. Let's just look and see what this is. Extract main article, main image, and metadata from URL. Demo. Extract. String. Load and extract article data. Return a promise object. Assume current platform supports it. Interesting. So I would make try-catch, like if, I would make try-catch a function that you just call, and then you would pass in basically this logic here to try out. If there's an error, then you would call this function here that just logs it. Okay, let's take a look at some code real quick. Whoops. What is this? Top level. TypeScript. Some definitions. Okay. Nothing too crazy. Got some interfaces, some functions. Okay. Let's go look at some. Let's take a look at some utils. I love the utils. Let's see. Transformation.js. Add. Okay, takes a transform. Look, so again, we're creating the transformation on the outside here. And we're passing in some sort of a, I guess it's a transform. I do like the use of this where we're pattern matching out patterns off of the actual object that's being passed in. You could actually just move this to here, right here, so you don't even need this line. And then you could just say, okay, and then you could just return 0 if any of these conditions match. Otherwise, you're returning, okay, so otherwise you're pushing and then returning 1. So that's, yeah, I would totally rewrite this, but okay, so that's add. Add transformations, checking to see if it's an array. If it is, then we're mapping by adding and filtering and then getting the length. Okay, so we're mapping by adding and then filtering. Okay. Just going to add. We're basically just going to add until we get all of our adds in, and then we're going to filter those, and then we're going to get the length of that. So depending, so what I'm seeing right away is that you're mapping on all of however many transformations you have here, you're mapping on all of them. And let me just, so you're mapping on all of these transformations first, right? Then you're going through and you're iterating through and filtering down whichever transformations happen to have a result of 1. And then after you get all of those, then you grab the length and you return that. This can actually be reduced, this can actually be changed to just a reduce. So having one collection, instead of mapping add to each one of them, right? Because you have to make this function call for each one of them to return 1 or 0. All right? So in your reduce, the very first thing you do is you make this function call to return 1 or 0. Then the very next thing you do is check, is the return of that 1 or 0? If it's 1, then you want to just set your accumulator to 1, right? So basically what you're doing, so instead of making all your add calls and then having a list or a collection of things a collection of 1s and 0s, and then having to go through and filter that collection down to just the 1s, every single time you go through on a reduce, you're creating a 0 or a 1. You're saying, is this a 1? If it's a 1, then you're just adding 1. Your return type of the reduce is an integer. So you've counted 1 that has a return type of 1. And then the next one through, again, you're making that function call, returning a 0 or 1. If it's a 1, or if it's a 0, then you're just returning 1, right? And then every single time, so every time through, you're making the function call and you're doing the conditional comparison to determine what number you return from your reduce call. This would be a lot easier if I just like write it out, but I think I'll do that in the next video. This one's already getting kind of long, so. But that's like just off the top, like that's just, you gotta, I would definitely change this to a reduce so that this map, this add, this filter, that they're all done in basically one call, in one line. Every single time you run across a transformation that's in an array, right? And then you're calling add again on all of the transformations. If this isn't an array, you're just assuming that it's a single transformation, and so you're just calling add on that. And that's going to return whatever it's going to return. It's going to return a 0 or a 1, right? So rewrite that, or make that, I should say, make that more functional than it currently is. Remove transformations. Yeah, here's a loop. We don't like loops. Yeah, I don't understand why we're looping here. Like, this is, so we're trying to use map and filter as functional constructs, higher order functions, right? But then we're going right into a loop here. And this doesn't need to be this way. We could probably just, again, use another reduce. So you could use a reduce here on line 19, and you could probably convert this, because you're just mutating, removing, right, and returning it. So this could all be a reduce as well. Reduce, reduce. Okay? Another loop. Reduce. Because again, this is the pattern. You're going to see this over and over again as a functional programmer. Start to take a look at this, right? Start to recognize this more. You're creating something. You're creating something on the outside, and on the inside, you're mutating it, and then you're returning it. That's a perfect candidate in most cases for a reduce. Just figure out how to reduce that. Just figure out how to put this in a reduce, and I'll show you in the next video. I'll walk through and I'll show you exactly how to convert that to a reduce. Okay, so transformations, we're mapping, and then we're filtering, and then we're mapping again. So map, filter, map. Map, filter, map, right? That should just be a reduce, because when you do a reduce, you can be a little bit more concise about each one of these steps. So this map step you can do. Then the filter is just a conditional. So you make this function call, then you check the conditional, and if it's what you need it to be, then you make another function call. So it's function, conditional, function. And that can be done every single time through, so that the collection doesn't have to go through multiple iterations, like a map and then a filter and then another map. It can just do all of those things one time through, and that's more efficient. So I'm going to stop it right there. We'll come back to this. This looks like a good candidate. This article extractor looks like a good candidate. Only 9 months old, not too old. And I'll show you exactly how to start converting some of this stuff. But it's getting dark outside now, as you could probably tell, and this video is already pretty long. So I will catch you on the next one.